The August 18th meeting of the Westwood Planning Board. My name is David Atkins. I'll be chairing the meeting tonight. I'm going to call the meeting to order with a roll call vote of all the board members, and also to confirm that they're able to access the meeting materials, and if there's any technical difficulties or anything, people please say so. I'll do a roll call of Mr. Paff.
Yeah.
Mr. DeLay.
Oh, you're on mute.
How about now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Ms. Conant.
Sorry, what?
Just a roll call of,
Yes.
yeah, okay, great. And Mr. Gotti.
Yes. Dave, your mic has a lot of feedback. I don't know if everybody else is picking that up.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time hearing. You're muffled at best.
Okay, let's, is this better?
Yeah.
Is that better? Can you hear me better, or switch over to a
Yes.
phone here?
There's some background like hum on you, like a vacuum almost.
All right, let's see how this goes. I'll read through the first part of this, and then if it's still hard to understand me, I will call in. So all meetings of the Westwood Planning Board are recorded by Westwood Media Center and broadcast live on local cable television, Comcast Channel 12 and Verizon Channel 42. Meetings are also available on the Westwood Media Center YouTube channel and are often live streamed. If this were an in-person meeting, I would ask anyone wishing to record the meeting to please identify themselves. But since the meeting is remote, that notification is not necessary. Anyone who wishes to record the meeting may do so. I would also typically remind attendees to silence their cell phones, but in this remote participation format, we will instead begin the meeting with only the board members and professional staff unmuted. As the chair recognizes individuals to speak, we will unmute them. Board members may choose to mute themselves when they're not speaking in order to minimize background noise. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I will endeavor to speak more forcefully then. So before we begin, I will outline the process. And of course, I'm on a different computer today. Our planning board meetings typically consist of 3 types of agenda items. We consider applications that have been submitted to the board, and we conduct public hearings where a public comment portion is required. We have other applications or discussion items that are not a formal public hearing, and the public will have an opportunity to comment, but at the board's discretion. And third, we review administrative items where board members will discuss issues and deal with items such as approval of meeting minutes, planning future agendas, and hearing updates from planning department staff and other boards. But prior to each agenda item, the chair will announce the item and provide some descriptive context. For applications, the chair will invite the applicant to address the board and give a short presentation summarizing what is being requested. Board members who have already received the application materials prior to the meeting and will have reviewed them. Board members may ask clarifying questions during and following the presentation. Professional staff and outside experts will present their research, assessments, and comments to the board. If the application includes a public hearing, the board will then proceed to the public comment portion of that public hearing. In this remote meeting format, residents and guests may participate in several ways. Attendees will be recognized to speak over the Zoom meeting application or from a telephone dial-up. Additionally, comments may be submitted by email or regular mail prior to the meeting. When we come to that part of the meeting, I'll remind everyone of the process. Following the public comment portion, the board typically deliberates and makes a decision or continues the hearing to a future date. All remote meetings require that votes be by roll call. When a motion and second has been made, the chair will ask if there is any further discussion before proceeding to a roll call vote, and will then restate the results of the vote. It's the practice of the planning board to keep public hearings open until a decision is made, in order to allow the consideration of additional materials that may be requested during the deliberation process, and to allow for additional public comment as new issues arise. So now as we move to the agenda, the first item on the agenda is 247 Station Drive, which is an application for a wireless installation. And I believe, and Abby has shared with us that the applicant has requested that this be withdrawn. The materials provided by the applicant, they noted that this was a request for business reasons having nothing to do with the previous public hearing. And so they are requesting that we allow them to withdraw the application without prejudice. So on this first agenda item, is there a motion to allow that?
I'll make a motion to accept the applicant's request to withdraw without prejudice for the wireless facility at 247 Station Drive.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'd second that.
So there is a motion and a second. Is there any discussion, any background information we need additionally?
Abby, have we heard any other reason as to why they're withdrawing?
No, they just said they weren't ready to go forward and they were no longer going forward at this time.
Because I foresee somebody wanting to be on the top of this building. So it's going to come back to the board, maybe not with this applicant, but some other wireless company will likely want to utilize that location. So I'm just wondering if they found some fault with that location or anything. That's okay.
All right, is there any further discussion? Actually, this is an item that Mr. Gotti was not on the board when this started, so he's not able to vote on this. And actually, I think, so I will, and will someone else second the motion?
Oh, yeah.
Was that a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Delay. So there is a motion and a second. I will ask for a roll call vote on allowing the applicant to withdraw this without prejudice. Mr. Paff,
Yes.
Mr. Delay,
Yes.
Ms. Conant,
Can you hear me? Yes.
and Mr. Gotti abstains, I believe. And the chair votes yes. The result of the vote is 4 in favor, 1 abstention to allow the applicant to withdraw the application. The second item on the agenda is for 80 Wilson Way. This is an environmental impact design review minor modification request. The applicant is requesting to modify one of the conditions of the application. This does include a public hearing portion. So with that, I would invite the applicant to present.
Hi, this is Michael Grill. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Condition number 2 of the June 12th, 2019 decision by the planning board provided that we would have a filtration system, or actually it was at that time, a roof filtration system completed by 30 days after the first tenant has occupancy of 80 Wilson Way. As you all know, we've leased 80 Wilson Way to Beth Israel Deaconess, and they are getting close to their occupancy. We have been working diligently with VHB, as well as a contractor that would do this work named Jones Contracting. There have been several modifications because of site conditions, and we're requesting that even though the contractors provided us with a schedule which shows the completion for September 30th of 2020, we're requesting that the deadline for completion of this project be moved to December 31st, 2020. And the primary reason is because site conditions keep on delaying various stages of the project. They learn something new about site conditions and plans have to be changed. So while the jellyfish filters have been ordered, they haven't been put on site yet. We don't know if the specifications have matched exactly what is going to be installed. So I'm asking for the ability to not have to come to the planning board after the deadline passes, but trying to come earlier and saying, this may be a problem and we'd like to have an extension.
Thank you, Mr. Grill. Are there any questions from board members?
How long of an extension?
To December 31st.
Last time we spoke, there were some concerns about even extending it to 30 days beyond when the tenancy occurred, because the rain's still going to occur, the snow, the drainage system still needs to be effective. So if we extend it till December, and you're saying that there are site conditions now that are prohibiting you from doing it, then we're running into the cold weather.
I'm sorry, I'm not saying that site conditions currently are prohibiting us from doing it. I'm saying that over the course of the past year, we've been working on this since the June 2019 meeting. There have been various site conditions that we've learned about that have changed the entire project from a roof system to a parking lot system. We've been working with Beta. We've provided to the planning board the details of our work and the various VHB plans that have been provided. So we're not hesitating at all in our approach. We're just trying to be cautious.
And I understand that, but I mean, whether you have it, the 30 days after a tenant is there versus, Mother Nature, I just think that we're going to keep kicking the can down the street here. And if we move it to December, then there might be issues then, and then we're going to have to extend it again. So, I mean, is there a reason why it's to December 31st?
Just to provide us with some leeway. It's not, again, we're trying to show by providing the information we provided that there's been no delay on our side or VHB side or the contractor side in moving this project forward. So it's not like there's going to be something that that we can do faster. Either we're going to we're doing our best to complete the project as soon as possible. There's not an amount of money we can pay the contractor to move things faster. There's not something we can pay to the manufacturer of the jellyfish to move things faster. We are moving as fast as we can.
Mr. Grill, can you remind me the staging of this? Is this an aspect of the building where there already exists a filtration system, but outdated? Or
Connor, would you like to address that? We have Connor Nagel from VHB in the meeting.
Good evening. As Michael said, Connor Nagel with VHB. The existing system on site does not have treatment. There is a closed drainage system, catch basins that capture the stormwater and discharge them to the small brook.
In this time up until
Yes.
the last date of December 31st?
Yes, and to clarify, the conditions that we've come across are more constraints. There's high groundwater and things like that may required us to change the design approach. It hasn't been weather, rain, anything like that has slowed this project down, winter conditions or anything. And the remainder of the season should be favorable. But the jellyfish footprint is much smaller than the original infiltration system that we were looking at. So it's really to do with the lead time on getting these jellyfish to the site. And if there happened to be anything that needed to be changed with them, a replacement had to be sent over. The timeline right now is so tight to the deadline that Mr. Grill has that we're simply looking for an extension so that we don't run over that timeline. Sort of being proactive rather than coming to you on the deadline and saying, hey, we missed it.
So there is drainage, there's just not filtration.
Correct. There's no treatment. Correct.
And that's been the case with this building since when?
It's since it was built, and I'd have to defer to Michael on that.
1974.
Okay. And Abby, what measures do we have in place to ensure that this is actually done?
Well, if you have a condition, prior to me signing off on closing out each permit, I report and sign off and close off with the building department as well as the planning board files. So if that deadline was not completed, we could enforce that through the building department, through the building commissioner as the zoning enforcement officer of not completing a condition.
So a COO could be withheld, or whatever document Joe is ready to sign off on this project?
It would be related to their original approval, which wasn't necessarily occupancy. It was the original proposal was the upgrades to the building, which was the front entryway. If you remember that, so that was what was before you. It wasn't
right. It wasn't
the tenant.
Right.
So it would be enforcement of your condition is what the building commissioner would have to act on.
If I can speak here, I would suggest that you asked the question, what is going to be the conditions that would require us to finish this on time? If you look at the various items that we've undertaken at this property, we've been working closely with the planning board and with Abby to get things done. We've very close to finishing the sidewalk that you approved. The sidewalk actually is finished except for the security and video measures. We finished the front facade. Everything's been done in a very timely fashion. And we expect that the filtration system will be done in a timely fashion as well. We're just asking for a little bit of leeway.
What is the likely occupancy date? I guess that's kind of the question, whether it holds up starting the occupancy, right?
Well, Beth Israel was the tenant that came later, so that was a separate approval. So that would be the occupancy. I guess the question is really tied to when the work related to the front entry facade upgrades. That's the original application that was approved to you by you in June 2019.
Are there any other questions or comments from board members? Is there anyone, we could move to the public participation if there's anyone here who would like to comment on this? Do we have it? Abby, can you remind the rules for the process?
Right. If anyone has a question or comment, they can raise their hand in Zoom. That's by going to the bottom of the screen, and where is that? If you click the three little dots where it says no, that's not it. Where's the raise a hand feature? If you know how to raise your hand, and then if you're on the phone, press *9, or you can put a question in the Q&A. Let's see. There's the raise your hand button at the bottom of the participant screen.
I'm not seeing anyone. Are you seeing anyone?
I'm not seeing any hands raised.
I'm just wondering, wouldn't it be more beneficial for us to do a 60-day extension versus a 120+ day extension and then revisit it in 60 days? just to stay on top of it, to make sure that, you know, progress is being made and that things come to fruition here, and just to make sure that all the conditions are met. I mean, to come back in 60 days doesn't really change. If they need an extension at that point, we can hear their rationale then. That's just my feelings on this.
How would that, if we were to say like August 31st instead of December 31st, is that?
You mean like October 31st versus December 31st? Just to get some updates to see where we're going versus to give that 120 plus day leadway.
The idea behind the December 31st date is that, again, based on our performance on the many things that we've been doing at the property, the work we've done with the engineering department, I would hope that our track record would provide the planning board with some confidence that we would do what we said we were going to do. And the notion of a December 31st date would be so that we wouldn't have to check in, and you wouldn't feel necessary for us to provide updates, first because it very well may be done, but secondly, that again, based on our past performance, and our discussions, our constant contact with Abby, that concern of the board, I don't see that that's warranted.
Dave, could I just ask a question? Michael, if you could just remind everyone when Beth Israel they're thinking of, they might be done in September, right? Is that what?
Right. This September 30th is their notion of when they'd be finished with the project. It's not like there would be anything really different in the parking lot, whether the tenant was there or the tenant was not there. The water's going to run, again, Connor can address this more specifically, but water's going to run into the catch basins, whether the tenant is there or not there. We're trying to complete the project as fast as possible.
So this is kind of what I was earlier. I was trying to ask, like, if September 30th is the date that occupancy is likely to begin, then you have currently 30 days after that. So actually, it would be probably October 31st would sort of be the current deadline. So you're really looking for like a 2-month extension here.
Correct. Yes,
that's an accurate assessment of that.
Yes. And again, based on what we see right now, we should have no problem here. But we've, again, proactively come to the planning board to provide us with, rather than asking for forgiveness in the future that we missed the deadline, we're asking for permission.
I think the concern that often comes up is just that right now we have a deadline that is tied to occupancy, and so things happen, unexpected things happen, and once you set a deadline out there that's hard and fast, then you lose the flexibility and whatnot. So, but I guess how do other board members feel about this? Like, what's your sense of this? Should we just extend it to the 31st, or how do you feel?
Well, I think you've already kind of hit on it. They're asking for a 60-day extension from the anticipated October 31st would be the 30 days. I don't think the applicant has shown any reason to give us any doubt that this work is going to be done. It seems to me to be a reasonable request. We're not expanding the scope of the project or altering the scope of the project. I think this is a reasonable request, and as long as Abby can stay on top of it, I personally don't have a problem with this request.
Dave, am I able to weigh in on this one at all? I would second that notion that, based on everything that I've read and heard, it seems like, there's no incentive for them not to get everything done. And it's a 60-day extension. And it sounds like really what they're doing is creating some buffer that when they get the jellyfish filtration system in, that in the event there's a piece that doesn't fit, they need a little bit of buffer to go back and get that part. And I don't know what, Mr. Grill, the time frame is on that turnaround, and then upon receipt of the updated part, what your timeline is to get that piece done. But it sounds like this 60-day would accommodate such an instance.
May I respond to that? The fact that you just said you don't know how long it takes for a jellyfish filter part to come back. Either do I. I've never installed a jellyfish filter before. I don't even know what one is. So just the uncertainty around a system that I've never installed before, that I have no idea when it shows up, what could possibly go wrong. That's the reason I'm coming to the board.
And this is an upgrade on a 46-year-old building. So I don't mind another 60 days personally, as long as it gets done, because that is a condition of the project.
And again, it's not like there isn't drainage. It's just not there's no filtration on that drainage. There is existing drainage there now.
Correct.
I think it's a reasonable request. So I'd be willing to give you an extra 60 days.
So procedurally, I believe we need to find that we need to find that it's a minor request and whether we agree to the modification. So Abby, is that two separate?
I think it's two separate procedures we need to do.
Kind of similar to how we've done some other items where, first of all, so the first question is whether or not this is a minor modification. So would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that I find that the board finds this is a minor modification to the plan submitted.
And is there a second?
Second.
So there's a motion from Mr. Paff, seconded by Ms. Conant, to find that this is a minor modification. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, proceed with a roll call vote. Mr. Paff?
Yes.
Mr. DeLay?
Yes.
Ms. Conant?
Yes.
Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So we do find that it is a minor modification. Now we could have a motion as to the substance of the request.
I'll make a motion to modify condition number 2 of the June EIDR approval to extend the completion date for the infiltration system until December 31st, 2020.
Motion from Mr. Paff. Is there a second?
Second that.
Mr. Gotti seconds that. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on the motion, which is to extend the deadline to December 31st to complete the infiltration system. Mr. Paff?
Yes.
Mr. DeLay?
Yes.
Ms. Conant?
Yes.
Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. There are 5 in favor, none opposed. The motion is agreed to, and the extension is granted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good luck.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. So now we will move to the third item on the agenda, which involves 13 Stonemeadow Drive. This is an earth material movement environmental impact design review public hearing. The applicant's proposing to import 470 cubic yards of earth material to construct a new single-family residence. We have some information from our consultant Beta as well, and with that, I will ask the applicant to make their request. Who is the applicant, Abby?
Yep, I'm just making sure. I think we have Mark Joyce here and Jeff Murphy from Fields and Thomas. Just making sure I'm pulling them in.
Yep. Can everybody hear me? This is Jeff Murphy with Beals and Thomas speaking.
Yes.
All right, very good. So yes, this is a special permit for earth material movement for the construction of a single-family home on Lot 3A, 13 Stonemeadow Drive. We submitted this request in mid-July, as along with a site plan which depicts, the proposed grading for the house lot. I don't know if that's something that Abby you have on the screen, or I can pull up, but basically the cuts and fills for the site are going to result in a net cut of about 1,350 cubic yards. And the intent is to use that excess material to, as part of the required fill material for the adjacent lot 3B, 11 Stonemeadow, which you may recall way back in February, we had come in front of the board for an earth material movement permit on that lot, which required, a need for import. So that 1,350 yards will help to reduce that amount. So as you can see, the site plan here, the house is kind of situated towards the back of the lot. We have a proposed driveway coming in off of Stonemeadow Drive from the cul-de-sac. And the driveway basically will slopes down, starting at Stonemeadow to a low point. There's a natural valley in that location. And then it'll kind of slope back up a bit. And then there's going to be that kind of circular turnaround driveway. And then kind of the back part of the property, currently there's an existing ridge line. So the back portion of the site will be predominantly a cut of material, while the driveway kind of in the valley is going to be mostly a fill, as well as the section that kind of comes down from Stonemeadow. There's a rocky knoll that exists there right now, and the driveway kind of will skirt the northern side of that knoll. So there'll be a net excess of material there as a result. And then the 470 cubic yards we quantified separately, which is to be used as the subgrade material for the driveway, as well as for the foundation slab, as well as the sport court in the backyard and some other patios and walkways. So that will be associated as an import quantity that'll have to come onto the site. And we provided written responses to Beta's comments, which were issued in a memo dated August 11th. Again, I'd be happy to go through those if the board has any specific questions on any of those items.
Does any board members have any immediate questions? Or not seeing any questions. Is any further in the others?
And just as an informational update, we're going to be submitting a notice of intent filing for this project tomorrow, actually, because there is work in the buffer zone. So that process will now be moving forward as well.
Yeah, if there are no questions from board members, there's a public hearing portion to this. So I would invite anyone who is attending the meeting virtually to raise their hand or enter a question in the Q&A section. Anybody here who would like to speak on this item? Just giving people a minute to see if anybody raises their hand.
Mm-hmm.
Not seeing anything. Abby, are you seeing anyone?
Not seeing any.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any public questions. Are there further board member questions or anything? So this follows the pattern of most of our earth material movement and EIDR items. We will have a number of waivers that are requested and then an actual motion on the permit. Abby, do you want to describe the waivers
Sure.
in this case?
Sure. There are four application submission waivers. These are kind of standard for submission of environmental impact design review. That's the exterior lighting plan, the traffic study, the presentation model, and the stormwater drainage report. So that's four waivers.
Are there any questions from board members about those waivers? Would someone like to make a motion to grant those waivers?
Make a motion to grant the four waivers: the lighting waiver, the model waiver, the traffic waiver, and the stormwater drainage waiver.
Mr. Gotti has moved to grant those waivers. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. The waivers are, it's always good to say why are we granting these waivers, and I believe it was said that essentially they're not needed. There's no lighting plan, there's no traffic study. We certainly don't need a presentation model. And the stormwater report, the applicant is proposing subsurface infiltration. So is there any discussion of these waivers? All right, then I'll do a roll call vote to grant the waivers. Mr. Paff?
Yes.
Mr. DeLay?
Yes.
Ms. Conant?
Yes.
Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So 5 votes in favor to grant those 4 waivers. The application itself, moving on to that, we have some conditions. Abby, do you want to summarize the conditions that you have prepared in the draft motion?
Sure. So in your packet, I had recommended 8 conditions for you to consider. They're sort of your 8 standard conditions with this kind of application. And the first one is that the applicant is responsible for protecting the pavement on Stonemeadow Drive. Number 2, that the construction entrance be cleaned regularly so that dirt isn't tracked out onto the street. Number 3 is reminding the applicant to comply with the town's noise standards, which are for construction noise, not before 7 a.m. And goes until 7 p.m. and then noon to 7 p.m. on Sundays. Also, that all the trucks carrying the earth material or any of the construction trucks, they should really take the most direct route. So that would be via Long Meadow to Summer Street from 109, and prohibited from traveling on that emergency connector. There's an emergency connector out to Far Reach Road. The 5th one is the applicant shall coordinate with Dedham Westwood Water District and get a new water service to this new house. The 6th one is the applicant's responsible for filing any other permits, such as the Conservation Commission, Commission's permit that's required. Number 7 is that the applicant is responsible for repairing any damage it may cause to the public ways, and would need to contact and coordinate with the Department of Public Works if there were any damage. And then the last one, number 8, is to keep the project plans and this planning board's approval on site at all times during construction.
Is there any discussion of those conditions or any additional thoughts?
We have a condition for certification of clean fill.
Let's see, maybe did the applicant, I didn't think of that one immediately because I think the applicant was bringing most of the site fill from the site next door. If the applicant could explain that a little bit more from that February, from your approval in February.
I think that was using the fill from 3A for 3B, and this is for 3A, is it not? Or
Yeah, this site would be a net cut. So it would be material going from this site to 3B, which is the site directly adjacent to it. And again, most of the material that would be imported I mean, this site in particular wouldn't require an import except for gravel material, which would have to meet, specifications to use as for processed gravel or structural fill as applicable. So that, would be material that they'd be bringing in from any other site. That would be a specialty import, so to speak.
So there's actually, you're saying there's no foreign material for the fill being brought in. It's shifting it from one property to the other. Is that correct?
Yeah, for this particular site, there's enough on-site material to satisfy the need for, the fills to achieve the subgrades, and then we're bringing in the specialty gravel import material. So that's the only thing that would be coming in on this particular lot. The other site, which again we talked about in February, was the one that had a net import required for it. So that was the one where they're bringing material in off-site. This one has a net excess of material. So
the other site is still going to need more material, even with this site's material?
that is correct.
Okay. So we'll see you then too. Right? This is only for this site.
Well, the other site was one that we talked about back in February. That was for lot 3B, which is just to the south of this
Sorry,
site.
my mistake.
The 3B is already covered by another permit, right?
Right.
Correct.
The conditions.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yep.
Does anyone else have any comments on this, or can we have a motion on this topic? Mr. Gotti, would you like to make a motion?
Sure. I make a motion that we approve the application with the modifications that Abby has enumerated here. Conditions.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Gotti has made the motion, and Mr. Paff has seconded the motion to approve this EIDR application from Old Grove Partners for 13 Stonemeadow Drive with the conditions that were just discussed. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, we will proceed to a roll call vote. And I see no hands raised or anything, right? So, okay, so Mr. Paff, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. DeLay,
Yes.
Ms. Conant,
Yes.
Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. It's 5 in favor, none opposed. The motion carries. The permit is granted. And there is a public hearing element to this, so we now would be looking to close that public hearing. If I could get a motion to that effect.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
Mr. Paff has moved to close the public hearing. Mr. Gotti seconded that motion. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, how do you vote, Mr. Paff?
Yes.
Mr. DeLay?
Yes.
Ms. Conant?
Yes.
Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. The public hearing is closed on this item, 13 Stonemeadow Drive. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
All right. The next item on the agenda is 321 Gay Street, public hearing for earth material movement and environmental impact and design review. The applicant is proposing to remove 785 cubic yards of earth material to construct a new garage, barn, and in-ground swimming pool. Is the applicant prepared to present?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Christine Meany with Site Design Professionals. I'm here to present the project on behalf of the owner, Gelly Kostovsky, for 321 Gay Street. A little background information. About 2 years ago in August, the applicant imported approximately 470 yards of fill material onto their property with the intent of building an elevated pad for a proposed detached barn to the rear of the house. The fill came from the applicant's brother-in-law's house in West Roxbury. When this import of fill was done, the applicant was unaware of the town's earth material movement bylaw. Subsequently, he was issued a violation by the building department and an enforcement order by the Conservation Commission because the work was within 100 feet of a vegetated wetland. After receipt of the violations, we were brought on board and the project evolved into a little bit more than just a barn. We're proposing a new driveway for the main house along the westerly property line, as well as an access driveway along the easterly property line back to the proposed barn. As part of the Conservation Commission process, we are providing roof recharge for the barn, and we've also created a lot of drainage swales to divert the water to the rear of the property where it's collected into a 3-inch deep drainage swale. So we have received conservation approval. It's been a little over a year, so we have a valid order of conditions. Resulting in this work between the import of the fill, also he wants to build a swimming pool to the rear of the house. So subsequently, approximately 780 yards of fill will be required to be removed from the site. About 180 yards of this will be for the pool itself. And the majority of it is to build the drainage swale to the rear and just, again, cutting into the ground to create a positive drainage pattern to the back of the property. According to the owner, the fill will be transported to a site, O'Donnell Sand and Gravel in Kingston, Mass. We've received 3 comments from town departments. One was from the fire chief, and we've resolved his comments. He just had some comments on the easterly driveway, if a fire truck could get to the back and access the barn. Another comment was from Beta. It involved the westerly driveway. Some of the proposed grading, we regraded the driveway to divert more of the driveway into the gravel packed trench that is proposed right at the entrance, which again will facilitate recharge off of the new driveway. And the last comment was from the building inspector regarding what's going to be stored in the barn. Excuse me, there will be no vehicles stored in the barn. It's going to be mostly for recreational equipment, boats, RVs, ATVs, and for the pool equipment and for patio furniture. So this will free up what's ever in the house garage to move out back into this new facility. That's about all I have at the moment. I'm not sure if you have any questions.
Thank you. Are there any board member questions? Abby, were there any additional staff comments that she didn't cover? I think she kind of highlighted the ones we have.
Yep. No further ones. The applicant summarized the ones we got. So the only question remains is if a special permit is needed for the barn. So that is something that Joe Doyle, the building commissioner, should review. I know he was away last week, so I didn't get to review with him before this, but that comment, we should just review that with Joe Doyle.
Yes, no problem.
Abby, the speaker indicated that the owner was unaware of our earth material movement bylaw. How is that possible that someone could go through this and not be to pull a permit? Aren't they made aware or asked a question? Does Phil need?
We do when a building permit is submitted, but I don't think initially the fill is brought in before a building permit. So we do have, one of the first questions anytime someone submits a building permit is we put the section of the bylaw in there and we ask if they're importing or exporting. So that was a recent change in the last few years, 2-3 years ago, that we implemented. So, but for things that are site work and not need a building permit, sometimes an owner wouldn't know until we discover that it's happened.
So this happened after the house was built? The fill was brought in?
Correct, yes. Yep.
Okay.
I believe the original builder actually got a permit to build the house for earth removal, but this is a new owner, and it was just brought in. He didn't pull a building permit for it, though.
Okay.
But can you clarify so right now we're looking for a permit to remove a bunch of dirt, and but previously a bunch of fill was brought in. Is that which was not permitted properly? Is that
correct? Right. Approximately little over 400 yards was brought in about where the proposed barn is going to create an elevated path for the barn. And now between all the site work that's proposed, between the pool, the new driveways, and the grading, we're actually have a cut of about 780 yards. And most of that's native material, but some of it will be the material that was brought in originally for the pad, for the barn.
Are there any other board member questions? Seeing there's a public hearing component to this portion, so if there's anyone attending,
There's a couple of questions in there, Dave.
I see a couple of them in the Q&A, so I'm going to just read the what's in the Q&A, and I would say that if a person is attending and would like to actually speak to this, we'll allow them to recognize them, turn their audio on, but I'll read these first. 321 Gay Street questions. We have some concern if so much earth material has been brought into the site and now a large amount is being removed. This site is surrounded by wetlands with a very high water table. Is this a suitable site for these actions? We would ask what the use of the barn is for, residential, for extra bays, or for business. And the second question, I'm just going to read both of these. Does the barn really need to be that big? This is an area which mink are regularly seen crossing Gay Street here.
Well, like I said, we did permit this extensively with the Conservation Commission and received a lot of their input for this final design. So it's not surrounded by wetlands. There is a man-made swale to the west of the site, and that was cut in. This was originally a farmer's field at some point, and then the wetlands are along the southerly border. So the cuts are very minimal, 6 inches to create a more favorable drainage pattern to the back. And the lot is well over 2 acres. So the barn is needed. The applicant does have, as I mentioned, a lot of recreational equipment that they'd like to store inside instead of outside. And there will be no more vehicles in this barn. It will, as I said, it will be recreational equipment, pool furniture, and pool equipment and pad furniture. They do have their basement is finished as well, so I would imagine they don't have a lot of storage for these items in the house.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments or anyone else wishing to speak on this? This follows the same process as our previous item. Essentially, there are some waivers requested, and then there is the actual permit. If I'm not seeing any desire for further discussion. Do you want to move on to the waivers? And maybe someone could just make a motion, and then we could discuss the waivers if we need to.
I'll make a motion, Dave, to accept the waivers as listed, lighting, traffic model, and stormwater.
I think there are 4 waivers listed: exterior lighting plan, traffic study, presentation model, and full drainage report with calculations. So I have a motion from Mr. Gotti to grant those waivers because they're not necessary for this application. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Mr. Paff. Is there any further discussion of the waivers? Then we will vote on the waivers. Mr. Paff,
Yes.
Mr. DeLay,
Yes.
Ms. Conant,
Yes.
Mr. Gotti.
Yes.
I vote yes as well. It's 5 votes in favor, none opposed to grant the waivers that have been requested for this project. We'll move on to the motion, move on to the discussion of the actual grant of the permit and the conditions as we had before. Abby, would you like to, is there any, you want to summarize the differences here, if there's anything special about these conditions?
Nope, I suggested your 7 standard conditions for this would be number 1, for the applicant to protect the pavement on Gay Street, to regularly clean the construction entrance so that dirt isn't tracked on to Gay Street, to follow the town's bylaws related to construction noise, which is only between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. during the week, and then noon to 7 p.m. on Sundays. The truck routes to stay on the main road, so from Gray Street, and I think from where it would coming from, it would have to probably come from the highway, so I suggested High Street from 109. Condition 5 is related to the applicant being responsible to file any other permits that may be required. Number 6, the applicant is responsible for monitoring the roadway and repairing any damage in the public way, first with Public Works approval. And then number 7 is to keep a copy of the decision and plans on site during construction.
So let me just confirm with the applicant, condition number 4, all trucks carrying earth material to or from 321 Gay Street shall travel from Gay Street via Route 109 to the interstate. So that's consistent, right? Like, it's what I want to make sure is if we've said that it's going to be to 109, that it doesn't result in trucks going up and down both directions on Gay Street.
The only question I have is if they're going to Kingston, could they go down Gay Street and grab like 1A? I guess it doesn't really matter. You're just coming in further north on 95 if you take 109. It shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, that route you're suggesting, you'd have to go through our Islington section or through Dedham somehow to get to that Route 1.
Right.
It would be easier and more appropriate to go Gay to High Street.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, is there any further discussion of the conditions, or would someone make a motion to grant the earth materials movement permit?
I'll make a motion to approve the earth material movement application for 321 Gay Street with the conditions that Abby summarized.
All right, Mr. Paff has made the motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
And Mr. Delay has seconded the motion. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, we'll move to a vote. Mr. Paff, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Delay,
Yes.
Ms. Conant,
Yes.
Gotti,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So the motion carries 5 in favor, none opposed, and the earth materials movement permit and EIDR application is granted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have to close this hearing.
Yes, this is also a public hearing.
I make a motion to close this public hearing.
Second that.
There's a motion from Mr. Paff, second from Mr. Gotti to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, Mr. Paff, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Delay,
Yes.
Ms. Conant,
Yes.
Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So by a vote of 5 in favor, none opposed, we close the public hearing on this item.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now on the agenda, we will move to discussion. I think those are all the hearings and work sessions, or hearings and items like that. The next item on the agenda is a discussion of possible articles to consider at a future town meeting, at a special town meeting in November, an annual town meeting in May. So we've talked about these articles a number of times at our last few meetings. So Abby, why don't you tee this up for us, and we'll jump into it.
Sure. So in September, the select board they make a decision if we're going to hold a special town meeting in November. So tonight, and then at your next meeting in September 8th, you should talk about what you want to submit by the fall. So you would want to be ready to go really with article language at your next meeting on September 8th, because right away the next day is when I would turn around and submit the article to the newspaper. So you pretty much have, tonight and in 3 weeks, that amount of time at your next meeting to make a decision for public hearing for fall town meeting. And then the timeline, past that would be working on items for Springtown meeting. And the warrant usually opens in December and closes usually in early January for Springtown meeting, which is in May. So I think, tonight and at your next meeting, you should be ready for anything to be submitted for fall, if there is going to be a fall. First thing is, at your next meeting, you'd want to vote to submit items to the warrant. Then the select board will make a decision about fall town meeting. And then we can keep working throughout the fall on any articles to be submitted for annual town meeting. So annual town meeting, we usually get started in January, and there are several, it's usually several public hearings. It's a longer time frame. For an annual town meeting, you usually have public hearings throughout February and March, leading up and continuing until town meeting in May. So I think last time you had talked about just resubmitting the one related to the firearms and explosives, because the planning board and the FinCom had supported that unanimously in the spring, but that one got bumped due to COVID-19, and reducing the spring annual town warrant this past June was reduced to financial articles only. So I think that one's in good shape, and I think you talked about that at your last meeting. And
I think to kind of pull things to a conclusion of items, so at our next meeting, right, we're going to need to vote on really starting the process for the fall town meeting. So at that point, we need the language of these. It's kind of either yes or no on each item. So I think tonight it would be helpful if we just each bullet say, okay, we want to proceed with that at the next meeting, or we don't, or we do something else. And so why don't we walk, do people agree that that's a good way to get through this list?
Yeah, I think the only thing that Abby was pointing out is I think we had the conversation as it pertained to the firearms one, and there probably isn't a need to go through that again unless somebody felt like they didn't have an opportunity to comment on it last time.
So why don't we tackle the most complicated bullet item here first? And I think the medical uses item. I think we all agreed that it's too complicated to deal with for the next town meeting, but we wanted to have some process that would have a better input into that. And do board members have ideas on how we could proceed with that in a way that would get better input from people and take it out of, so that it's not sort of have a better discussion about that. And can we spend just a couple minutes on if anyone has an idea for how we should handle that?
I think the first thing we need to do as a board is to weigh in on whether or not this board wants to pursue this article. Is this a worthy article of the board's time? And I'd like to get a polling of each board member to find out if this is something that the board feels it's important enough to pursue. I'll start off by saying I do believe these four items mentioned in this article, or these four definitions, I guess, is incredibly important. I believe the town is at risk and always has been, and I think it's our job to minimize that exposure. So I'd like to hear from other board members as to whether or not we are going to pursue this, or whether they think we should pursue this.
Tend to agree, Chris. I feel like we have exposure. This is part of what we're supposed to do, is help mitigate that. And I think this process from now till, I don't think we're going to be able to get this done, to your point, Dave, for a fall town meeting, but the time is now to begin the work to review what we want to have on the docket for the spring town meeting.
I personally would like to see some data and some research that sort of gives us an idea whether we're better off designating an area, or if we're better off not designating an area. All we keep hearing is we have to do this, but show me the reason why. I need to see. I'm a very research-oriented person. I need to see exactly why we need to do this. Don't just say it has to be this way. Show me the research that says, yes, all these towns that didn't do it got hit with this. All these towns that did do it got hit with this. I need to see the data that shows what is in the best interest of our town before we can make this decision.
Mr. DeLay, you unmuted yourself? Did you want to say something? Or?
Oh, I kind of stand with Debbie as far as I think if you designate an area and you're inviting a medical use facility, if you don't designate an area, is there anyone that's really going to come in to the area with a medical use facility? I don't know if we need to designate an area. I'm not fully convinced of that.
All right, I think Ms. Conant made some good points that even beyond this board, we need to demonstrate why if we're going to do it, it needs to be able to show why it's necessary. And I don't think that's a process that we're going to get to through the five of us talking about it every meeting for the next few months, but I mean, could we form like a working group of some sort, or is there something that we could do where we come back to this board with some hard data on this issue? If there's a lot of things like, what are other towns doing? What have other towns done? I would agree with that, because if we haven't, we're not going to get anywhere if we just if we're not all behind this. And I would like to see is it the biggest priority? I'm not sure it's the biggest priority right now. COVID's kind of the biggest priority, but so Rob, did you want to say something? Did you have a suggestion or something?
Well, I like the idea of, additional public input and some type of a working group that comes back having fully reviewed and making a recommendation to this board. My understanding of it is that if they're in absence of a designation, we can't stop it because it's a protected class, right? And so it could theoretically go in any one of a number of places. And so I think if those options are vetted and presented to the board and allowed, for public comment as well, then I think that would be a good path forward.
I think, though, that beyond public input, I mean, let's be realistic here. You don't go to an orthopedic surgeon for cardiac surgery. We have to get some real legal input by someone who specializes in this type of zoning. We need to know spot on what are the pros and cons of doing this. And, the buzzwords are, it's my understanding, I think, it might. Those don't cut it. That's too gray of an area. I'm not a gray person. I need black or white. It is or it isn't a good thing to do. And how do we get that information? By polling 100 residents doesn't give us that information. We need firm advice on what we need to do and how to move forward with this. If we want the public behind us on this, we need to show them the reasons why. And we need to be able to back it up.
So I really, the whole nature of zoning is to anticipate and prepare and to protect your town as you see it. We designated a certain district or address for our adult use without any expectation that it would ever come in. But if it did, then that's the only place it can go. We did that 20 some odd years ago without any expectation that it would ever come in. But if it did come in, we certainly didn't want to see it on Route 1. But it could have if someone decided to pull an application if we weren't zoned properly for it. I really don't think we're going to see a whole lot of data from around the state on this new issue. And frankly, the whole issue that is a concern is the substance abuse treatment facility within this bylaw. We are exposed in terms of, Abby, if you can correct me, the hospital definition is not accurate. The medical center, is that the other one that's not accurate? We don't have a proper definition within our town. There's a lot of other things, not just the substance abuse treatment facility, that is contained within this bylaw. And I really think if you're looking for black and white within zoning, you're not going to find it. It just doesn't exist. It's a protection. It's like saying, well, I'm not going to waterproof my basement before I build my house because it hardly rains here. But why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you protect yourself on the off chance something should happen? It doesn't make sense to me at a zoning board, like a zoning agent like the planning board would ignore the exposure that the town has on this. I don't understand the stick your head in the sand approach and hope that no one comes in to file an application. I know it's a hard decision to make, but it's our job to make it. And to say, well, let the next board deal with it. Let the next town resident 20 years from now who, when they're exposed to it, let them deal with it. I don't think that's why we were elected.
I disagree, Chris, but I think that we had special counsel to help us with the university. What was the reason for that? We need to have somebody come in to guide us, to help us understand the implications of the zoning, who specializes in zoning, to say yes or no. And it's not about sticking my head in the sand. Meditech was not a good choice. That building could have been sold at any minute. And then it could have gone anywhere. So, you know, things went off course with that one. So I'm just making a recommendation. It doesn't have to, you know, you guys may not support it, but I mean, what is it that you're afraid of? What is the worst case scenario of getting another opinion as to why or why not this is a good thing to do? Or to help us even locate an area.
I think you're going to get, if you ask 5 people, you're likely to get 4.5 different opinions, legal opinions on this matter. There is no black and white. It's, do you have the opinion that you should protect your town for future events? Or do you have the opinion that no, you're attracting attention to your town by simply talking about it or enacting the zoning? I'm on the, obviously we're on different philosophies here. I believe we should act, and I'm not going to fault you for your opinion. I just differ from it.
Well, I think that the reality is that if we're to change the bylaws, you know, we either need a unanimous planning board, or we need to have a community that really understands what it is that is desired to be done and sees the value in it. And so we don't have that now. We do not have a consensus on that. So I think we have to go back to gathering the data on this and to come up with a process that will get us somewhere. Because what I'm afraid of, I don't want to have another public hearing where we just try to change it again. And a lot of people, like you say, 5 people have 5 different opinions. You know, we got to find a way to get a consensus on this topic. And right now we do not have a consensus. So, I mean, does it make sense to try to form like a task force or something, a working group, or who would be on that group? Like what, are there other people in town that could be on that group? I believe, can we agree that the problem is we want to protect the town from undesirable development of medical facilities in neighborhoods and stuff? I think everyone, right? Like is that kind of the...
Yeah, well, that's the whole reason we're discussing the firearms issue. We're trying to protect certain parts of our town from that going there. That's the same thing that we're talking about here. We don't want it to be in certain parts of our town. So let's say that in our bylaw. That's all zoning is. Let's put it here. And I know it's a difficult decision because we're a bedroom community and almost every zone involves people's homes. I get that, but there's no way that it's possible this substance abuse treatment facility could go anywhere. If we don't tell it, it has to go somewhere. I don't know why that's not being heard. It really can go anywhere. And it can go in an empty single family home anywhere. And we have no way to say, no, you can't do it. As Rob alluded to before, it's a protected use. We can't, it's a higher class within our state government of protection. We can't say, well, we don't like that. And so you can't come here. I don't, and this has been kicking around. This whole idea has been around for three plus years. And if this board, after 3 years of considering it, still can't come up with the action item of let's zone it properly, then I don't know how we're going to get there. I don't know how an attorney telling us, yeah, it's probably a pretty good idea, or no, it's not. Even if an attorney says, no, it's not, my gut is still going to be, we zone for things to protect us from undesirable situations. That's what zoning is. So I don't know how an attorney's going to tell me different on this.
You know, Chris, I couldn't agree with you more on that. We need public backing, though.
I agree. I said that months ago.
To get that 2/3 vote,
I completely agree. We
We
need
need
a
to
working
provide
group.
them with a comfortable information. We need them to understand that yes, we need to do it, or no, we don't need to do it. We need to sway the public with information to make them feel, yes, we need to vote with the planning board for this, or we don't need to vote with the planning board. We need them, in order to get a bylaw changed, we need them on our side. How do we do
I completely agree, Deb. We need public buy-in. I said that 3 months ago, back in April, or 4 months ago. We need more public participation in this process. As I understand it, the issue was not about the definitions laid out in this bylaw. It's always been about the zoning. So let's talk to our town, and not the whole town. We couldn't get a consensus from the whole town as to which zones, but let's talk to through a working group and get a consensus as to what zones that we currently have work for this designation, for these definitions. I think what we need to do is come up with this, have the working group work throughout the fall, get ready for January when the articles start being written, and then work towards a spring town meeting. This has been identified as an exposure within our town since, I believe, 2016, if not sooner. It was approved in 2017, and we all know what happened there. So let's move on this. Let's do some work. And if it means talking to zoning attorneys, then let's do that. But I think primarily we need to get public participation in this process. I firmly believe that.
There's a whole class from the Citizen Planner Training Collaborative about planning with community support. And I don't know, Abby, do you have any thoughts on how could we start this up? Because again, I'm agreeing with Deb from a practical point of view. Like I do not want to have meeting after meeting where we just sort of argue about this. We agree that there's a problem. We just disagree on how to solve it, I think. And so how do we, let's form let's have a separate meeting that's not the planning board, but it's like 1 or 2 people from the planning board, an attorney, maybe, even somebody from the medical perspective, somebody with neighborhood perspective, and people who are willing to go out and do some research and come back to us and make an argument for why we should do this, because we're just saying it doesn't make sense, even if we all, right? So Abby, do you have anything any process suggestions or?
Dave, I have a question. I've heard just a couple times, looking for more data, and I'd like more clarity on what that data is, because, if a town doesn't address it and they don't have a facility come to the town, was that a causal thing? If they do address it and they don't have something come to town, was that a causal thing, or was it not not a place where such a facility would want to be? I don't know that the data that you're looking for necessarily exists. To me, it's where can this go according to today's bylaws? And if it can go anywhere, then do we want to have say in where it should go? And then given that, what are the options? And then if you have a working group, let's talk about all of the various options and have that working group come to this planning board with a recommendation.
So in 2017, obviously we didn't do it right. So I feel that whatever we do, we should make sure we do it right. So we shouldn't go with just opinions. I think we need facts, and I think we need to support whatever we're doing with facts. So I just don't want another 2017. It's going to come back at you because you don't do it right.
So once again, the question is, what's our next move? And I think our next move is to form a working group and then recruit people. I mean, it makes it sound really big, like forming a working group, but what we're talking about is a couple of planning board members who would then find who else could be included in this discussion, and then maybe have a couple of meetings. Which would of course be Zoom meetings now, but get Dan Bailey again, maybe to tell us what he told us before, or somebody else. Maybe there's another attorney. The data that I'm thinking of is sort of comparative. It's saying, well, what have other towns done? You know, does Dedham deal with this? Does Norwood? What has Needham done with this? It's not like we can't predict what's going to happen just because we zone a certain way. We aren't going to be able to control that, but we should ask the question, well, what have other towns who have asked this question of what do I do about zoning medical uses? Like, what have they done? And if the answer is they've all passed bylaws that define it in a certain way, then that's probably a pretty good indicator that we should move quickly down that path. If it's all over the place, as it might be, then I don't know. But maybe through that process, we can identify some people who would be able to come back to us in a couple of months with some recommendations. So, are there people? Can we get a couple of volunteers? I mean, Deb, would you be willing to be a part of this, to meet a couple of times outside our planning board meetings to
It would
articulate your
depend
concerns?
on the timing that was required of that.
So, Dave, I want to ask a question to be clear. Is this working group going to work with an attorney addressing the potential need for zoning, or is this working group going to work on the zoning? Because I don't hear a consensus from this board that zoning is the issue. I hear there's a divergence here as to what the next process should do.
So my thought was, you start from, is there a problem? I mean, you start from the very beginning and say, what have other towns done? I know you're saying we know that there's the problem, we need to zone for it. Okay,
I don't know that a working group is going to be a part of that solution. I mean, that's a very small sample, and it's the townspeople. I think from what I heard from Deb and Bill, they were looking for legal guidance, not necessarily on this particular issue. Is there a problem? Am I right in paraphrasing that or characterizing it that way?
Well, I think we don't want to rely upon, should I say, scare tactics. In other words, we got to do it because we have to do it. We need to have I think maybe a lawyer, a professional, and maybe you need two professionals. Maybe you need two lawyers. You say you're going to get different opinions from them. Maybe you're not. So.
Also, I mean, this is something that's going to, if we don't do anything, then the select board's going to come back with their own thing, right? So it's not going to just disappear. So another important point would be to include them in this as well. I mean,
So
we're
Dave,
talking about a small group of people, basically. Like if it's a planning board, one or two people from our group here, a land use attorney who knows about this, an expert in this area. Maybe ask the Board of Health what their thoughts are. I don't know. They're pretty busy, but
if you want buy-in from the public, you have to involve the public. You can't just keep grabbing from town commissions and boards. You need to get building owners, commercial building owners in town who may be affected, or maybe not. People who know about zoning in town who aren't currently on boards. I'm not saying you can't exclude select board members or whomever, but there has to involve other people. And the problem is, as soon as you start including planning board, select board, and then others, you're up to 15 people. And that's really hard to get things done with having such a large group. We saw that with the Islington Center Task Force. It was really difficult to get that thing moving along. I would advise something like 8 to 10 people, mostly of town people, residents, not so much select board members. That's my take on it. Is I want the public to be involved in this. And yeah, I know select board are residents here, but I don't think if the planning board and the select board work together, I don't think that's necessarily going to generate buy-in from the townspeople.
Why don't we poll the residents first? Why don't we set up some sort of a a survey or questionnaire that can't be taken multiple times, and ask them, have specific questions that will help to put them in more of a comfort zone to feel that they're involved in the process, and what areas they might like to see designated, what they'd like to see.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but in this particular aspect, we are a representative democracy. We are the representatives here, and we need to do the job of the people. And throwing it out to a direct democracy like that is, we have over 10,000 registered voters in town. We're never going to come up with a consensus of an action item. And we, frankly, know more about zoning and the importance of it than the regular everyday person who lives in town. And that's why we're here doing this.
We did it for Islington. We did it for university. Why is this any different?
Dave, if I may.
They did polls about.
I know we did polls, not about zoning, as to whether or not this is an exposure for our town. That's an
I'm
interesting.
not asking about exposure. I'm talking about, did they have any recommendations, or maybe someone had experience?
What zones?
So if I may, right? I mean, so Deb, you wanted some black and white, and it seems like a very easy thing to do would be to get a black and white opinion on whether or not a facility like that could go anywhere based on today's zoning. Abby, is that something that, town council could give us a black and white decision on? Because the other thing that we're talking about is potentially going out and getting some other zoning lawyer or something like that. And we don't have the authority to authorize that spend. That would have to be a request that we'd have to put in someplace else, no?
Right, and I see we have Pat here, our town council. Maybe.
Yes. So Dan Bailey has worked on this issue in the past with the planning board and I believe the board of selectmen. Dan Bailey is as fine a land use and zoning attorney as I've come across in my career. I would not be opposed to recommending that he, if you want, give you an opinion letter of the risk that the town faces by not moving forward on this. I could do it, but Dan is a far more experienced zoning and land use attorney than I.
Because if we did that, now we would have a black and white, is there a risk? And now we would be actually in the realm of the discussion of, okay, so given that, do we want to have control and say over where that goes? And if so, then let's explore the options. And I think that, Dave, is where a reasonable sized working group comes in, looks at the various options and makes a recommendation. That would be how I would recommend proceeding.
I will tell you, I've done some work on some study on this last spring. And I will tell you that my observation around the Commonwealth is that various, I'll call them for-profit chain substance abuse facilities, were picking off closed nursing homes, and they were zoned for medical use and were easily transferring them to become substance abuse facilities. One was on the Cape, I think across from an elementary school. I don't know if that went in, but one was in Millbury and did go in. So there is, in my opinion, some risk. I can get you better expert opinion from Dan Bailey if you request it.
So would this be a good starting point then? Have we sufficiently asked the question here that we could give it to someone? And I don't know if, do we have, is that a good starting point here to basically ask an expert land use attorney to advise us on
I think that it sounds to me as if actually everybody agrees that we need the definition of that as the black and white starting point, because it's only once you know that you can then make the case to enlist and enroll the support of the public. So to me, that sounds like the most logical starting point. So I would support what Pat suggested.
Yeah, I think that's based on all the concerns echoed here tonight. I think that is a good starting point, but I still I still don't know that this board agrees that even if an attorney says, yes, you are exposed, that acting in the way of zoning is the way to go. I believe it is, but I don't believe every board member thinks that this risk is to the extent that we need to zone for it. So I think that the board needs to collectively, or individually, I should say, think about, do I think that we're exposed to the point of action, or are we just going to say, no, we're not? We'll roll the
I don't
dice.
actually agree with that, Chris. I actually think that I heard from others that if this is an absolute risk, that we do want to have some control over it. And then the discussion becomes, okay, so given that, where would this be best situated? And I think that's the part that I believe I heard some consensus around the idea of, if this is truly an issue, then we should act. I don't want to put any words in anybody's mouth, but I thought I heard that.
If that's what was said, I'm sorry I missed that, but I didn't hear that consensus. So I'm sorry if that's what was said.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we individually, could we submit questions that Abby could collect, and we could ask for a legal opinion from Dan Bailey on this topic, just to ensure that we get the full perspective, because I think that some of us have different questions than others, and I don't know that we're going to even summarize it all here tonight now, but I think that would be a reasonable starting point on this? So it kind of given, we're not going to propose, I shouldn't say it like that. This is not, I don't believe anyone here wants this to be an item on the fall town meeting, right? Nobody, no, we're nowhere near that.
Never getting done by September.
So put away all assumptions of anything in the future, and just the first questions are whether the town whether we residents have this risk, and what can we do about it? And that's what what we would be asking of Dan Bailey, I guess.
But just because it's not expected to be on fall town meeting, the work needs to start as soon as possible, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done if this is going to be ready for spring.
I think the first work is to get the consensus that
I understand. I just don't want to see it waiting until October.
So I would say we don't talk about this at our next meeting, because I'm sure we won't have a thorough response. Well, we should never say that, but
just continue.
Let's get the questions together to Dan Bailey and have time to digest those, and then schedule. And then from there we can figure out what the next step is.
Dave?
Yes.
I think it's a good idea to get your questions to Abby, but I'd like to be a filter on those questions as well, to make sure that we're not duplicating things. And I will deal with Dan Bailey. I need to get permission to bring him on for this project, but I'll recommend that we do that.
So do we ask for funds? Do we vote for funds to hire Dan Bailey? Is that the?
No, it comes out of it. That will come out of the legal budget, which I'm basically responsible for with the town administrator. So I'll have a talk with Chris when he's back in town, and I don't foresee a problem bringing Dan in to write an opinion letter on the risk of not moving forward on medical uses and other questions that you may have.
All right. I saw there's a bunch of people in the Q&A, and I didn't describe this in advance, but we're as a work session that there was not going to be like a general public Q&A, but I think we can all, I'm just going to take a quick look at these questions. And there are some good suggestions: surveying towns, specialized counsel, bringing in specialized counsel, and here's someone's given us a list of towns that have no definitions, and also a suggestion that we would get an unengaged third party to participate. So like, because Mr. Bailey has given his opinion in the past, let's get the questions, well, to Mr. Ahern, and so we can, to kind of Chris's point about looking for a black and white, if we are told by the attorney that we have to do X, well, it depends on how we are told, right? It depends on, it's not just, he says, yep, you've got a risk, you know, short memo. That's not going to work. Like, we need a detailed sort of explanation of what's happening. So I think that that's what we would need. And I apologize for not reading all the questions out loud, but let's include these. Abby, you can like save these questions off, right, and share them with everybody, or every people can see them. There's a couple of bits of data in here too. So, all right. So that's an action item for the medical uses one. If we go back to our list of town meeting articles, firearms, next meeting we'll have language and we'll move forward. Abby, do you want to pick up where we left off here and briefly say what would you need from us if we wanted to move forward on these bullet items?
Sure. And one of the other ones that didn't go forward in the spring was the one on prohibitive uses. So if the planning board wants to go forward with that, I mean, it did not receive a favorable recommendation from the FinCom in the fall. So I think if you wanted to take that on, I'd recommend, you know, adding some, you know, changing a little bit before bringing it back. So if you want, do you want to, for that one, do you want to put that off indefinitely, or do you want to try to bring that up again this fall? This was the one where at the beginning of the bylaw it says a use not specifically listed as prohibited. We already have that language in the zoning bylaw, so I think the FinCom's recommendation was that it was redundant. So the planning board can either try to amend that further if you want to bring it back, or if you don't want to go forward with that right now.
Can I get a poll of, so just in terms of, for this coming up fall town meeting, how many people, how many board members want to proceed with a revision of the prohibitive bylaw language?
Are you polling us individually?
So let me do a sort of a roll call poll then, Mr. Paff. There's no motion, but just.
Yeah, I would not be in favor of pushing this forward. I think it's superfluous.
Ms. Conant?
You know, I don't know, because they say we're protected under, I think it's 1.4, but then they say we're not protected under 1.4, for example, for the medical use. So is there something catch-all that we can come up with that's going to be that way? I don't know. I don't know if it's worth looking into.
Abby, what did Joe Doyle say about this? I don't remember what he said. He's essentially our police agent on this, right?
Right. He says for him, the process is he looks to the zoning bylaw with the existing definitions and uses to see if it's allowed, or if it's if something comes in, he asks for, you know, a detailed description of what the business proposal is, and then if it doesn't fit one of the uses, he denies it, and then the applicant has the option of appealing at the zoning board of appeals, of appealing the zoning interpretation officer's opinion.
Did he voice an opinion about this specific article?
He said he didn't think it was, you know, helped or hurt. It was just the way it was written last spring that we submitted. He didn't think it helped the situation at all. So I think the situation where this very first came up, where we started thinking about this, was a couple of years ago, about the medical uses as a treatment center. I think that, so it would be the same process. If something came in, such as a treatment center, that wasn't allowed, the building commissioner would have to look to our existing definitions and make an opinion. And then the applicant would then either agree or disagree with the opinion. And if they disagree, they would appeal it to the zoning board of appeals. And then the zoning board of appeals would have to make that determination. And that's, that's where we first started thinking of those options. But in the end, we thought it was the reason in 2017, in 2019, I think it was, when we brought the medical one, we thought it's cleaner to say where it can and can't go. That way it's not a matter of opinion, because then it's just whatever lawyer for the applicant is going to be making an opinion to the zoning board of appeals at a later time. So, that's where we started looking at this language at the beginning of the bylaw. So, and I think another reason why we were more worried about the medical one was because oftentimes, a petitioner would argue it's a similar type use, and we allow office of a doctor and office of a dentist in most of our commercial districts, including our local business districts. So the fear was that a petitioner would go through that process, get denied with the building commissioner, then go to the ZBA and make an argument that it's considered an office of a doctor because we don't have anything else. So that's where we really start. That's why we were looking at language in all sections of the bylaw, definitions and our uses.
So I was polling people, but
Sorry, I interrupted that.
go to so it's really just, do we want to invest any time in improving the prohibited uses bylaw article that FinCom rejected last time? Do we want to try again in the fall, or do we want to postpone it for the spring? So, and Chris is saying no, not for the fall, and Debbie not sure. Bill, what are your thoughts on this one?
I still think it's worth discussing.
All right, and Mr.
Again,
Gotti,
yeah.
What do you think on this? I'm not trying to cut everybody off, but it's like,
No, that's fine. I'm not in favor of moving it forward because I think Abby's description just now actually highlights the need to have the previous discussion regarding where that type of facility can and can't go, because I think that was the impetus behind a lot of it. I'm also reticent to put in language that says unless it meets a specific definition. We're in a time where commercial real estate and retail is going to change quite a bit, and I don't know that we can anticipate and define every use case, and so I'm a little bit reluctant to pursue that. I would much rather deal with the previous article that we were talking about. So I'm not in favor of spending a whole lot of time on it.
So how do people feel about just putting this off until spring?
I'm okay with putting it off to the spring.
All right, let's. I hear, and my feeling is it's too many things on the plate here. So let's put that to the spring. The other items. Abby, there's some, short-term rentals. Let's just, again, quickly, do we want to bring that up again for the fall or the spring? And just trying to go through in order. Mr. Paff?
Neither.
Mr. DeLay?
Yeah, I'd like to see it brought up.
Ms. Conant?
I think we need to work with administration on this. We need more, registration, those types of things.
Yeah, I agree with Deb. That's why I said neither. This is not a zoning thing. This is a general bylaws issue, that's where we can solve this problem, if there is even a problem.
Mr. Gotti, what are your thoughts on this?
I concur with Chris on that.
And I do. I think it's. I think we need to talk to the other departments, and I think, as we've talked before, there are a lot of things going on with COVID and everything right now. So getting the Board of Health. So I think I'm a no on the fall town meeting on this too. So I think I think that's our plurality anyway. Um, there are a couple other things. Are there any other things that, so Abby, you had added a couple of things to this housekeeping and anything else? Like housekeeping is just a placeholder, right?
Right. I just sort of one more. The building commissioner in the past has brought up that our zoning bylaw currently allows temporary uses and temporary structures through a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. And he says he's oftentimes gets questions about, you know, something such as a retail, you know, a store wanting to do like an outdoor tent sale or something temporary, something very temporary, and that usually the process for the Zoning Board of Appeals is 3 months long at the minimum. So he recommended, you know, administrative approval for short term, so things that are under six months or less, with an administrative review by himself and by staff. And the reason I thought we might want to take this up now, I think this one's fairly easy. I could work with him on putting some language together, but I think it may come into play as we're, you know, I know we're kind of in the middle of the pandemic, and we've been able to allow outdoor seating with businesses. We do have that allowed in our zoning bylaw based on a review by the building commissioner. But as we move forward into the winter, we may come up with other things that businesses may run into. So if we are able to think in terms of some temporary or short-term uses and events, I think that could be helpful to work on that in the fall. That way, if anything comes up during, you know, November and later, if there's anything related to how businesses are.
So it sounds like the building inspector has some specific ideas about what we could do on this. So it seems reasonable to me to just, if you were able to bring something to the next meeting that would be ready to discuss and vote on, then we could do that. Unlike these other items, which need a lot more thought. Does anybody kind of agree? It's interesting too that I was at a meeting today of the trick meeting where there are all the different towns. I mean, yeah, they're all talking about stuff that we don't. Yeah, they're all talking about COVID and businesses and stuff, and we're not really talking about that at all. So this is slightly relevant to that. Like it's slightly relevant because of the temporary uses and things. And I just, you know, I hope that we don't spend all of our energy on stuff that nobody else believes is important. But that's anyway. The other items on the list here. Was there anything else?
No, that was it. I just added housekeeping. Just if we're going forward with the firearms one, we'll just put a placeholder for items that's just fixing errors that aren't any changes, just kind of typos, numbering checks.
Are there any other zoning issues that we should be considering? And again, any other items? Okay, so let me just, at the risk of, you know, just to summarize. So for the next meeting, what I'm expecting is that we would discuss and vote on some specific language for firearms. This thing that was just raised about the short-term temporary uses, and that we would have an opinion in response to our questions about the medical uses. But there's nothing else that we would be voting on to send or to begin the process of drafting for the fall town meeting. Is that an accurate summary?
Dave, do you want to have a deadline for when the questions have to be submitted by? So that it gives Attorney Ahern time to go through them and get responses and get back to us.
I think today's Tuesday, like is a week or the end of this week or next Tuesday? What do people think?
Dave, I would take a week and think out your questions thoroughly. I think that's a reasonable time. I don't know how long it'll take to turn an opinion around, but once I see what the questions are, I probably will have a better idea of being able to give you a time frame for a response.
So why don't we say, if you have questions about the medical uses issue that you would like to have addressed, let's have them
So
submitted.
can I just point a clarification? I'm sorry to interrupt. You don't want this for a fall town meeting anyway, do you? I thought I heard that discussion.
Correct.
So if you want to take 2 weeks to formulate your questions, and then I'll try and get a letter turned around in 2 to 3 weeks so that by mid-September, you have a general idea of what the legal consensus is. Then you can start your process during spring town meeting. I mean, trying to get it turned around for a November town meeting would be insurmountable.
So what's the deadline then, I guess, that
Say by the end of business next Friday. Not this Friday, next Friday. I believe it's the 28th.
All right, is that everybody?
My only suggestion there would be if we could do it by this Friday, and that allowed the opinion letter to be to us by the September 8th, because we don't have all that many meetings between, the September timeframe and when the warrant needs to be filed in January. I think that was one of the things that Abby was pointing out, was that even though it seems a long way off, it's a fairly compressed time frame. So, I'd love to have the black and white opinion by the 8th meeting, and then we can decide what our go forward is once we have that. That would be my point of view.
Right.
I'm good with a shorter time frame like that.
Right. 'Cause
Okay.
it's 3 weeks till your next meeting. So maybe if you could have questions, is Friday, end of Friday this week reasonable?
The 21st?
The 21st?
Yeah,
And if you want to take the weekend and go to the 24th, that's okay too.
all right. Why don't we say the 24th is the deadline? That'll give me time to get home too.
We submit them to Abby or to
You can submit them to Abby, and Abby will forward them to me. Is that all right with you, Abby?
Yep.
All right. Let's see. Are there any other items to discuss related to zoning articles? All right, then let's move on. So the next items on the agenda and other business, we received 2 open meeting law violation complaints submitted by Nada Milosevic Fabrizio on July 28th. And we have our town council, Pat Ahern, is here. And what I would like to do is turn it over to him to walk us through the process of assessing and responding to these complaints. I'd like to give the board members who were named in the complaints an opportunity to respond if they are willing to do so. And then for the board to discuss what actions we should take and how we should respond to that. And I believe that the complainant is attending the meeting tonight. And so I would recognize her after we've had the initial discussion and everything. I would recognize her if she would like to make a short, like a 3-minute statement. Typically we would be responding to the materials, but if she would like to make a statement, I think she's here. Let's hear her statement and listen to that. So that's kind of the process that I would outline here, and I would ask Mr. Ahern to take over and guide us through that.
Okay, so we have 2 complaints, and I would like to talk about the second complaint first because it involves all 5 of you and in theory Abby as well. And the second complaint, basically, I'm going to summarize it, that you failed to give proper notification for entertaining a discussion related to specific proposed zoning amendments at your the June 30th meeting. I've taken the time to review the complaint. I've rewatched the tape. I've ordered a transcript of the tape because I'm planning to make that an exhibit in our response. If you choose to respond, you've got to let me know. So I guess my first question is, do you wish to respond to that complaint, and how so?
Mr. Hearn, do you mean for just individually anyone who wants to respond to that?
Yeah. So I've reviewed the documentation, the tape, the transcript, and it is my opinion that you did not have a substantive discussion on zoning articles at that meeting. The agenda item was timeline for summer, and I went through and I believe that you had a timing discussion. The first part of the discussion was a discussion of fall town meeting and the differences between the timeframes of fall town meeting, a shortened time frame, and spring town meeting. There was a question just after that, and I'm summarizing this for expedience. So you've got a copy of the transcript. There was a question from Mr. Gotti about when the comprehensive plan would be complete. And again, that was a scheduling discussion so that you could, the comprehensive plan could be used as justification for potential zoning articles or articles. What followed that was a discussion on potential articles you would like to revisit from the ones that got kicked at town meeting. And there was direction about when you would like to discuss them, as you did tonight extensively. You were proposed to have members work on specific presentations or specific articles. Again, there was really no substantive discussion of those articles. There was a general discussion that night on medical uses and timing of it moving forward. Tonight, you finalized that, and you've taken some steps forward substantively. There was discussion on more public input on the medical uses. You discussed that tonight, but again, differently. There was discussion on potential energy efficiency articles. There was a discussion of possible items the planning board might want to look at, and the town planner spoke of putting together a list for the planning board to consider for future meetings, which you actually discussed tonight. There were no votes taken. There was no substantive discussion of specific language of articles. In my view, it was a process discussion to plan for future meetings. The town planner was given direction on what to do and scheduling, in terms of scheduling, and that's just what the agenda essentially stated. Now, the complainant is asking for additional training be given the planning board on open meeting laws. Additional training is never a bad thing for any of us. It would be my recommendation, if you want to respond, that you agree to take additional training. And I've looked it up tonight while you were discussing other things. See if I can find it here. The Attorney General has a seminar on Wednesday, September 23rd at 6 p.m. and they have them regularly that you can attend for additional training. So my recommendation, if you wish to respond, would be that you agree to additional open meeting law training, but that you, I don't think that you violated the agenda or the notice requirements of the open town meeting, but that's up to you to decide.
So I did also look through the transcript and the meeting there, and actually there were a number of points I believe where we said things like we're not going to discuss the details of this tonight, and we were in planning in sort of like project planning mode. You know, when will we, how will we handle this? Just like what we've been doing here, except we weren't getting into any of the specifics. So I agree with that. I can see where when the agenda simply says work plan, if a person is unfamiliar with the planning board and isn't as in deep with it as we are, then they might not foresee that it would be a very long discussion with a lot of different things there. So I think it's also great if we do like we did for this agenda, where we list out more specifics as to what when we say we're going to have a work plan. I don't see any problem with adding more detail to the agenda, but I don't think that anything was done to intentionally hide things. I think it was just we have to plan what we're going to work on this year. So that's what it is. It's the planning board.
So I think that when the Attorney General looks at these, they look to see if the agenda is specific enough for the public to understand what's going to be discussed. And as you said, to your point, Dave, work plan, that could be, anything, but it's not specific enough. If I recall, though, in our memo from Abby, it did say something about discussion, maybe if we had any articles that we might want to consider for town meeting. So, maybe moving forward, we need to sort of be more inclusive of any type of information that we might be discussing that we foresee. For example, with the work session, did we know there were going to be articles? Did we know there might be, anything that we just list it and, be proactive in it? Because it's too general. I think work planning is just too general for the public to understand exactly what's being said.
Are there other board member thoughts on that? I guess I'm agreeing that I don't think there's anything technically wrong with what happened, but it gives us a good advice for the future to be more detailed in our agendas. And I also agree with taking the classes, the training things. We already have to take the ethics training every couple of years, I think, and
Every 2 years.
Yeah, and I think that the citizen trainer planning cooperative group, I've been to a couple of those where there were roles and responsibilities. I agree. I think everybody should. Especially now, it's probably possible to do it virtually, but those would all be good things to do. And I don't think it's punitive. I think it's just something that would be beneficial. So I don't know how we put that into a response, but that's my thoughts.
I would agree with Mr. O'Hearn. I think the key word is substantive discussion. I don't believe we had any on the articles or proposed articles at that time after watching the meeting and reading the transcript. So I would agree with his assessment on that. And I think that's a key word here. We didn't talk about the articles in terms of what we were going to do. We talked about timing. So I think that's why I agree with Mr. Ahern's assessment. And with regard to additional training, I'm fine with that. Not for any reason other than training is always good.
I would agree with that, Dave. I mean, as I looked at it, we had work, the work plan. That's what we did. We planned the work. And if satisfying the complaint is handled by taking a course, I took a course before joining the board. Abby had sent me something. I think it's the same organization that you were just referencing. And, I'd be happy to do that with, this thing on the 23rd with the AG.
Have you heard from everyone, Dave? Or do we have or Mr. Ahern, do we have a move? Are we moving forward on this?
Waiting to see what you guys want to do. I think you need a motion.
Mr. Delay, were you going to say something? Or
Yeah, I just don't want anybody to ever feel that we're trying to put something over on them. So I have no problem with taking the classes.
Ms. Conant, do you feel the same way?
I agree with the class, absolutely.
So what I propose to do is write a response to the AG, presenting the findings as we've discussed them here this evening, or you've discussed them, that there was no substantive discussion, that the agenda was not violated, but that you agree with a recommendation to take the class. And I would have to draft that up, and I have till the 25th to get that in. So if you want to make a motion to direct me to do that, I'll be happy to do that.
Would we be able to, by email, I guess, since we don't meet again, to look at the letter? Or
you want me to circulate a copy of the letter, I will do that.
I'm not necessarily saying we have to do that. I just wanted to know what our options were with that. Don't know how the rest of the board feels about that. I would make a motion to ask Attorney Ahern to write a letter explaining or our response to the second complaint for the open meeting law violation as just described in the last 5-7 minutes of discussion on the board.
Point of order, it actually has to be an answer to the complaint, but it will be in letter form.
Okay. However, Attorney Ahern deems it legally responsive. I make a motion we authorize him to write a letter of response to the second complaint as just discussed by this board.
I'd second that.
there is a motion, Mr. Paff, second from Mr. Gotti. Is there any discussion?
And he's going to distribute that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll try and circulate it before I send it. So
Okay.
I'll try and get it out by Friday or Monday. We'll see.
Okay. All right.
It's not going to, Mr. Delay, it's not going to be lengthy. Even for a lawyer standard.
No?
Will it be a second letter from the first complaint that we're about to discuss?
No, the letter we're discussing now should not be that lengthy for a review.
Okay.
All right, there's a motion and a second. We'll vote Mr. Paff,
Yes.
Mr. Delay,
Yes.
Ms. Conant,
I'm going to abstain.
Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So there are 4 in favor and 1 abstention.
So the first complaint, there was a method to why I want to go through the second complaint. The first complaint also recommends additional training as one of the resolutions. So you've already agreed to that. The second complaint is against 3 of you. I'm sure you've read them. It's against Mr. Atkins, Mr. Gotti, and Mr. Delay.
No.
No, I'm sorry, my mistake, Mr. Delay, Mr. Paff. I was looking at you on the screen and I didn't change the name. My apologies, sir. And again, I've reviewed the tape and the transcript. And so the basic complaint is that 3 members violated the open meeting law by meeting as a quorum outside a public hearing. So you 3 members are accused of that, Mr. Paff, Mr. Gotti, and Mr. Atkins are going to have to tell me how you want me to respond to that. And there's some factual pieces in that complaint that I believe need to be addressed. but I'll go through those after you've had a chance to tell me how you wish me to respond to that. And let me just say, before we get into this any further substantively, I know this is a delicate situation. I am not trying to put people in a bad situation. There was a vote. And some people are not happy with it. I understand that, but the complaint needs to be addressed. So I'm going to try and do this as delicately as I can. And I just want to say that up front. So, Mr. Atkins, if you'd like to respond to that, I'd be all ears.
So I did not meet with the others as a quorum. I was interested in serving as chair. I asked Mr. Paff to nominate me, and I assumed there would be a discussion at the meeting. I didn't email, call, or talk to Mr. Gotti about any of this before the meeting.
Okay.
Also, it was mentioned in the complaint, there was a talk about a document that I had prepared.
I'm going to get to that. Okay, Mr. Atkins, I'm trying to keep it orderly. I'll get to that, I promise. Mr. Paff?
Mr. Atkins and I spoke. We both expressed an interest in being chair. I declined eventually, and he asked me to nominate him. I said I would.
Mr. Gotti?
I did not talk to Chris or Dave about the vote or anything prior to the meeting.
Okay, so in the body of the complaint, it states that essentially within seconds, there was a nomination and a second, and within second, board members who were subject to the complaint voted down the nomination. I've reviewed the tape and I've reviewed the transcript, and I believe that's not an accurate description of what happened. I believe, Mr. DeLay, you did nominate Ms. Conant. I believe, Ms. Conant, you did second that nomination. But I believe that, Ms. Conant, you moved that for a vote without any discussion or without calling for other nominations. That's what the transcript shows. That's what the tape shows. So it was, once the vote was called, people had to vote. So after the vote was unsuccessful, Ms. Conant, you asked for discussion, and there was no discussion. Mr. Paff, you questioned and discussing after the vote, I believe it was, and there was no discussion after the vote. There was a subsequent nomination of Mr. Atkins by Mr. Paff, Mr. Gotti second, and there was a 3-2 vote, making Mr. Atkins the chairman. There was a subsequent vote making Mr. Paff the vice chairman, and there was a subsequent vote making Mr. DeLay the secretary. If anybody disagrees with anything I say, please speak up if you think I'm reporting it inaccurately. So there was discussion throughout the meeting about the vice chair not moving up to become chair. There's nothing in the charter or the bylaws that requires a vice chair to become chair. And Ms. McCabe prepared a chart for you for your meeting tonight, where something like 10 times in the past 20 years, the vice chair of the planning board has not become the chair. So I plan to include that chart in the response.
Pat, if I could, I just have a quick question.
Yes.
Who authorized Abby to make the chart?
I just checked. I mean, no one authorized me. I just looked back from the last few years.
And who authorized the transcript to be
I did.
formatted? Okay. So all of this was done before coming to the board and the board making a decision as to which direction we should go.
No, I think I'm authorized to get a transcript when something is a complaint of.
We already voted on these minutes from June 30th. So I'm just curious as to who authorized the transcript, who authorized the expenditure.
I've already told you I authorized the transcript, and I think that's well within my purview as town council to do that.
Okay. And just for the record, having gone back to multiple meetings, there has never been any discussion on any of the vice chair and chair nominations. So my not saying that, I don't really feel that that's a valid point to make, but that's just my opinion.
Understood. Understood. And I only bring that up because of what I believe to be an inaccuracy in the complaint.
And agree, and you know what, that chart that I would recommend, actually, I would recommend not forwarding this chart because it would actually support the allegation of discrimination because it only shows 4 women in 22 years and none of them having succeeded as chair. So I would not include that as part of your defense.
Point understood. Okay. So later on in the meeting, there was a discussion about participation in various boards and committees. Mr. Atkins, you prepared a chart. The complainant contends that that's somehow proof that you knew you were going to become chairman. Could you describe your process in preparing that chart?
So before the meeting, I was trying to remember who the different people were on the who have been appointed to things. I knew that we were going to be voting on that, and so I made a list. I went back and found who the alternates were and everything. And so I made that table myself, just preparing for the meeting to see what the impact was of where the gaps were. And then during the meeting, because we've gone through this process, I mean, I've like 4 or 5 times now, and it's often confusing as to what the different items are. And I thought it would be helpful to share what I had prepared. So that's what I did.
Okay. So the complainant has 2 requests to resolve this matter. The first request you've already agreed to take additional training in open meeting law. The second request is to nullify the vote. Now, I'm not sure the Attorney General can do that. And even if they can, I don't know what the process for them to do that is. So my question for you, and you can say no to this, but my question for you is, would you be willing to revote the situation and make that an offer to resolve the matter? And I'd like to hear from all of you. And Ms. Conant, I'd most like to hear from you on this matter.
No.
You don't wish that?
No.
And I can understand and empathize with that. So I understand that, but I'd like to hear from others.
If I thought it would be helpful, I would agree to it, but I similarly don't really see a reason to.
I would say,
Mr. DeLay?
sorry.
Oh, did you? So I would be willing to have a revote. Yes.
Are you talking about a reorganization?
Revote the reorganization, yes.
Do that tonight, you mean, or?
No, it would have to be approved.
Okay.
What happens is I send my response to the Attorney General and to the complainant. The Attorney General asks the complainant if they're satisfied. So what I would do in my response is say, you're willing to take a class or training. You're also willing to revote the reorganization if you wish.
Okay. So we'd have to,
You'd have to go through the process again.
okay, and we'd have to, so those that are now the chair and co-chair couldn't be chair and co-chair?
No,
Oh, okay, it's just a,
you'd have to revote it.
oh, okay, and so we have to wait and see what the Attorney General says about the
You
evidence.
have to make, if you're willing to do that, you have to make that offer.
We have to what?
I'd have to put that in my response.
Okay, so looking at the evidence of the spreadsheet, is that what we're looking at right now?
No.
Oh. Yeah, I think I'd be willing to take a revote.
Okay, Mr. Path.
I would be willing to take a revote, but I would defer for the obvious reason to Ms. Conant.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Gotti?
I would echo what Chris just said. I'd be willing to do it, and if Deb is willing to do it.
Ms. Conant, you don't wish to do that.
I do not.
I understand and respect that and would probably feel the same way. So
maybe I'll change to no. I'll say no.
okay.
Yeah.
So I will draft a response that outlines what we've talked about this evening. Offer to take the training, but you don't wish to, is it fair that you don't wish to revote it? I guess I need to understand your opinion on that in a kind of assertive way.
Well, I said no. Bill said no. Who else said no?
I will vote no.
There you go. You have it 3-2 or however.
Mr.
else.
Gotti, let's try to make it 5-0. Mr. Gotti?
I'll say no.
Mr. Atkins?
I will vote no.
Okay, so I will draft that response. I will try and circulate that as well. Do you have any questions for me? These are not easy discussions to have. I thank you for handling it as professionally as you have this evening. I don't have anything further.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hearn. I did say that if the complainant would like to make a statement, if she's attending the meeting, I would be open to that if I don't give that opportunity. Not seeing a hand raised. All right, then.
Hey, Chris.
Yes?
I mean, sorry, not Chris, Dave. Could you just take a motion on, take a formal vote on the response, agree to additional training, but not to revoting?
Okay, so there is, in what form? So we have the, is there any objection to Mr. Hearn's filing the answer as he just described, and for this board to take the actions that he described, which is to all of us to take the additional training and what was the other item?
To not revote.
And that we do not wish to have a revote.
Right, Pat, just for clarification, even though 3 individuals were specifically named in the complaint, it's my understanding that the complaint is against the board in totality. So
No, the complaint 1 is really against the 3 individuals as I've read it, but the board's involved.
So, but I mean, if 3 have to take it, because it's the planning board, we all have to take it, correct?
Are you talking about the course?
Yes, yes.
Well, the second complaint is against the complete board,
Right.
and the resolution asked for is to take additional training. So all of you would have to take it if you agree to that.
Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
So will someone make the motion then, or I'll make the motion if that's. The motion is that Mr. Hearn would respond to the complaint and that we would respond to both complaints. We already did the first one, right? So on this one, it's the response is to say that in the previous response we've all agreed to take the training, and then to sorry, I just lost it here. What
I think
someone
I'll step in. I'll make a motion that Mr. Ahern write a response letter for the planning board, indicating that the 3 named people responded with denying assembling a quorum outside the meeting, and that the board voted to not revote the reorganization, and that the board agreed to additional training for open meeting laws. Is that complete and accurate, Mr. Ahern?
Yes.
I'll second that.
Is there any further discussion? Then I'll call for a vote. Mr. Paff?
Yes.
Mr. DeLay?
Yeah, mute.
Yes.
Ms. Conant?
Did you call me?
Yes, he did.
Yes.
Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So that appears to be, it's a unanimous vote. All right.
So I'm thinking, should we make a motion to replace the minutes with the transcript, since we have the transcript here?
That's up to you.
An official. It's, what is it, 57 pages?
Is it that long? Actually, I think it's a little bit longer.
That saves us the
Yeah,
trouble.
it's 70 something.
70 something pages.
76.
That is correct.
So do you want to, is that a motion then, Deb, to,
Yeah, I'll make a motion to replace the minutes with the transcript.
is there a second to that?
A second.
So there's a motion from Ms. Conant, seconded by Mr. DeLay, to substitute the transcript that was compiled of the meeting in place of the meeting minutes. Is there any discussion?
I question whether you have to replace, or could you just amend to the existing minutes? Because I don't feel like the existing minutes were inaccurate either.
Amend it. And we already accepted them, so you could just add it on.
Right.
Which is fine. I mean, we paid to have it done, so.
So then
Probably need to amend the motion to.
So amend the motion to tag the, to add the transcript to the minutes that were already approved for 6:30.
Okay, Mr. DeLay, are you still good with that?
What's that? Yep. I'll second that.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. We'll Any further discussion, then we will go with a roll call. Mr. Paff,
Yes.
Mr. Delay,
Yes.
Ms. Conant,
Yes.
Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So that motion passes. All right, so I believe that is that agenda item. The next item on the agenda is an informational report about 750 Everett Street. This is in Norwood. It's the Amazon warehouse distribution facility. I believe that Abby could begin that, and Mr. Ahern, you might have something as well.
Sure. Since your last meeting in middle of July, we did learn that a new Amazon warehouse and distribution facility was approved last month in July in Norwood. So we did learn about that. We have, since your last meeting, we've been in touch with the new property owner. And we've also talked to some Westwood residents. Some of the neighbors that live in that area have contacted us, and we've been in touch with them to learn more about their concerns. And we've been working with the property owner. We've asked some questions. Staff has a call set up for later in this week to talk to the new property owner and someone from Amazon to learn a little bit more about their facility, to answer some of the questions that we have, and try to work on some solutions that will help mitigate some of the concerns, which is mostly having to do with traffic. Traffic in Westwood's roads, specifically on Everett Street and Forbes Street, we were questioning traffic, for the trucks and the deliveries. And there was also concerns about noise, because this is a 24-hour facility. So I don't have too much more to update at this time. We did submit an appeal. The planning board and the select board submitted an appeal. So that's, in litigation right now. And then we are, going to have, a meeting later this week and hope to provide more of an update at the select board's meeting on Monday night, this upcoming Monday on the 24th.
All right, thank you, Abby. I think we also have meeting minutes. Let's see, do we have July 21st? And you don't have the transcript from January 28th, do you?
We do. It was in your packet. Did you see it was we did get the transcript for the January 28th meeting.
It's there.
Okay. Are there any changes to these minutes that anyone, when you take the July 2nd minutes first, are there any changes anyone wants to propose?
July 21st, you mean? So there's one edit on July 21st on page 6. It's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 from the bottom, where it says, where I asked the question, do you send the minutes to be reviewed and edited? But the comment was left out. It should have said prior to us getting them as draft for approval. And that sort of changes the whole meaning of that, because then the next sentence was, Mr. Paff suggests a transcript. And they need to have an understanding as to why a transcript is being requested. And also, too, I'd like to add that I mentioned that I felt that they manipulated the meaning of the conversation by altering the sequence of the transcript for the discussion. And that was the whole dialogue of the conversation, which is why the transcript was asked for. And if you don't add that, people don't understand why the transcript was requested.
So I think, so that's a motion to amend the minutes to reflect that.
That's correct.
A second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, then we'll vote to accept those changes. Mr. Paff,
Aye.
Mr. Delay,
Aye.
Ms. Conant,
Aye.
Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So those changes to the minutes are accepted. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes, July 21st?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended in the last vote.
Second.
Motion from Mr. Gotti and a second from Ms. Conant. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, we'll start with Mr. Paff,
Aye.
Mr. Delay,
Aye.
Ms. Conant,
Aye.
Mr. Gotti,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. So the July 21st meeting minutes are approved. And then we go to the transcripts. I think this would take the form of a motion to accept the transcript as the meeting minutes for January 28th.
The other thing I want to say about the transcript is that the transcript was really well done, but there was a lot of, and I don't know how they do the transcript. Do they watch the video and type it, or do they just listen and type it?
I believe they listen and type it, Ms. Conant.
Because there were a few times where they listed me as making comments when it was Abby, and Brian making comments when it was Bill.
So it's okay to go through a transcript and properly identify parties like that. And if you want an opportunity to do that, I would urge you to do that to make it more accurate. Because with a transcript, you want accuracy and it's above all else.
Correct. It's an official record. So I felt
Correct.
that, I mean, I'm happy to go forward and send you the edits that I found.
Don't send it to me, send it to Abby.
Okay.
Okay?
Sure.
But right now, you believe it serves as a good basis for.
So, I mean, there was only one edit that I would make, and that was when it was on page 5, where Mr. Paff said, "Did we just vote to spend $10,000?" And they said, Ms. Conant said to spend, to retain, when actually I said to retain, not spend, which is different. So I just wanted to have that.
Go through it and make your proposed changes.
That was the only actually one that had to be changed other than the speakers.
I'm wondering if we can, so that's a very specific change. We could do that as an amendment here now. Were all the other things like misidentifications where you could just go through and.
Everything looked good except for who was saying, and there was a lot of inaudible areas that I was surprised she couldn't hear them. But yes, everything else except for who was the speaker, which, is pretty important when you're looking back on the transcript as to who said what.
Dave, I would recommend that you let Ms. Conant go through and get a list of proposed changes, and then you guys.
All right, let's take this up at the next meeting then.
There you go.
Move to the next meeting. Are there any other items to discuss tonight? All right. If there are no other items to discuss this evening, then without objection, I would declare that the meeting is adjourned. If there are no objections, we'll adjourn the meeting.
We need to make a motion to do that.
Dave, yeah, you probably have to have a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
There's a motion to adjourn and a second by Mr. Paff. All those in favor, or We'll roll call, Mr. Pat,
Aye.
Mr. Delay,
Aye.
Ms. Conant,
Aye.
Mr. Gotti,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. So the meeting is adjourned.